Good evening, everyone. My name is Susan McLaren. I'm the Creative Director here at Communication Leadership, COVID-19 Consultancy at the University of Washington. On behalf of ComLead, I'd like to welcome you to our student-run 5-part speaker series, Communication and Connection in the Time of COVID. Our topic tonight is thoughtful brand communication in a pandemic, a very timely topic. It is a lovely evening here in Seattle, so thank you for joining us. I have a few announcements before we get started. We are recording tonight's conversation. If you have the bandwidth, please do turn your camera on. It's always nice to see your faces, but please keep your microphone off. Thanks to those of you who submitted questions in advance through Thought Exchange. We will follow Jay's talk with an audience Q&A session, so please type your questions into the chat box. Our Zoom DJ, Ryan Quigtar, will then collect and post questions to Jay for a portion of our time together. Well, let me introduce Jay Howard. Jay, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Susan.
Jay grew up on the Jersey Shore and started his career in Venice, California. And lucky for us, he is currently a faculty member in the Communication Leadership Program at the University of Washington. A few of you have probably taken his brand values and creativity class, and if you haven't, I hear you definitely should. I have not yet. Jay was shaped by a culture of innovation and has produced simple, iconic work for Apple and Steve Jobs, now in the permanent collection at MoMA. He has also produced work for Microsoft, Intel, Hewlett-Packard, BMW, Nike, and Starbucks, to name a few. Jay was a Fulbright Scholar in Visual Culture, received a BA from the University of Pennsylvania, an MA from the Annenberg School for Communications at the University of Southern California, and is a graduate of the Stanford Executive Program at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Jay, thanks for being with us this evening, and I think we're gonna kick it off with a short video.
Sounds good.
When we first opened our doors.
Since 1926.
Since 1978.
For 60 years.
For 75 years.
For over 80 years.
In 90 years.
Over 100 years.
Nationwide has been on your side.
Restaurants have always been there for you.
Nissan has been with you through thick and thin.
We will do what we've always done.
Take care of people.
We're people.
People.
People. People.
People.
People and family.
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 Family. Family.
Family.
Family.
Family.
Families are families.
Families.
Even now.
Especially now.
Especially now.
Right now.
Now more than ever.
More than ever.
Today, more than ever.
Today, more than ever.
In times like this.
At times like these.
During these difficult times.
In these troubled times.
Challenging times.
Trying times.
In these times of uncertainty.
During this time of great uncertainty.
During these uncertain times.
During these uncertain times.
In uncertain times.
In uncertain times. Uncertain times.
Unprecedented times.
Unprecedented times.
Unprecedented times.
This unprecedented moment in our history.
It's time of social distancing.
While things have slowed down.
As we turn more inside.
While the doors may be closed.
While the distance between us has gotten bigger.
The more we stay apart.
We still find ways to stay close. Even when we're apart.
Even if we can't stand closer than 6 feet.
We can all stay connected to work, school, and most importantly, to each other.
There's still ways to touch each other.
All without leaving the comfort and safety of your home.
Without leaving the safety of your home.
From home.
Home. Your home.
At home. Home.
Home.
Home. Home. Home. Home.
Home. Home. That's the key.
Buick and GMC are here to help.
Con Edison is here to help.
Here to help.
Our teams are here.
We are here.
We're here.
We're here.
Here for you.
Here for you.
We're here for you.
We're here for you.
We are here for you.
We're here for you.
We are here for you. We'll be here for you.
Runnings is here for you.
We're still here for you.
We're with you. We're part of your community.
So you can trust us.
You can count on us.
And we'll get through this. Together.
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 Together. Together. Together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
And together.
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 MasterCard.
Great.
That was 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And I hope that wasn't too painful for everybody. But I wanted to show it to you because, as you can see, there's a lot of similarities between a lot of brand communications going on. And the similarities are really striking. Everything is really well-intentioned, and I'm happy that these companies made an effort to do something. Unfortunately, this was an opportunity for them to stand out and show how much they care and what they're doing. And there's almost a group think involved. I don't know what you all think, but it's by using almost the same music, by using the same words, the same scripts. And these are done independently in-house at these companies or through advertising agencies. And there's the sameness about it. And unfortunately, it all blends together. And for people who are seeing these commercials, whether they're on Instagram or YouTube or on the regular television, they all kind of mush together and are not memorable, in my opinion. And please chime in the group chat if you agree or disagree, or if you've seen something similar or have a question on any of these, let me know. But it's an opportunity at this time for nonprofits, for profit companies to think of something that would really be sincere and think of something, a concept that would really touch people, that would also distinguish them from other companies. So it's a fantastic opportunity. And what bummed me out a little bit about this montage, which you just saw, was the sameness. It all just kind of mushed into one big commercial. And I wanted to talk about doing thoughtful brand communication in this odd time that we're in right now, because I think there is a chance to do it. And when you see it, it really stands out. That video was sent to me by a friend who's a creative director at Apple. And as you know, I've worked on Apple for many years, and it struck him as well. So that's why he sent it to me, and then I had a look at it and I said, wow, this would be a really interesting thing to show to the group and get their feedback. And again, it's not a commentary by me about how awful or how terrible these things are. Everything is really well intentioned. But Susan, as a creative director, I know that you know, trying to really differentiate yourself creatively is pretty key. Whether it's in a crisis, whether it's in normal times, it really is what sets you apart, because there's so much noise. And it's not only the visual communication that you put out, it's any kind of press that you put out, any words that you say in public. If they're heartfelt and if they're thought through and it shows some degree of work and consideration, I think people appreciate that, especially in times like this. So I want to show a couple of images that reflect this that I noticed. The first is from a baseball club in Taiwan, And I know some of you are from Taiwan, some of you, Evelyn and a few others. And this is a professional baseball game, which they started their season last week with no fans. So this team, which is called the Rakuten Monkeys, was trying to get across a theme of fun, even though they couldn't have fans, instead of talking about what was not right with the situation. They were making the best of what they had. And they were broadcasting this. And so this was by using mannequins in the stands and playing music. All their players are tested and temperature checked before games, and there's nobody in the stands. They were able to bring some fun and levity to things and not make playing baseball feel like people shouldn't be doing it. They're doing it for the benefit of the fans who can't be there. And by organizing these mannequins, and they did allow a few cheerleaders to come into the scene, they really did something for the community in which the game was played. And this is how they're going to approach the season until they can eventually bring fans in. And what struck me about this was that it was a form of brand communication, but it was more appreciative. And there's a quote from one of the players on the Rakuten Monkeys, whose name is Chu Yu Sen. And he said, at first, everyone felt this was a bit weird. But as these mannequins grew in number day by day, we started to see it as an unusual marketing campaign. So that's what it is. It required some thought, it required some legwork, and it seems to resonate with people. And actually, they announced this first game, I think it was last Friday, as the only live professional sports event on the entire planet. And it has a good vibe about it. So I wanted to show you that as an example of taking action, being really creative, being very authentic and original, and trying to put a smile on some people's faces instead of kind of conforming into this kind of groupthink and these very bland stock footage images and piano recitals and sameness. And I think this was appreciated very much by not only folks in Taiwan, but folks across the world who really are jonesing to see some kind of professional sports. The second example I want to show you is, Airbnb. And Airbnb, unfortunately, in the last 2 weeks had to lay off 25% of its workforce. And Brian Chesky, who is the CEO of Airbnb, did something very unusual. And he sent out a tweet which said, "We have great people leaving Airbnb, and I think other companies will love them as much as I do. If you're hiring, reach out to me at brian.chesky@airbnb.com, and our team will connect you." And so that's the CEO of a company giving out his work email and mobilizing his company in this very creative way to help those that unfortunately had to get laid off because of this COVID crisis. He took all of his internal recruiters, and I think he allocated maybe 75% of them to helping these people who had been laid off from their positions find new work. And he developed a communication plan and also a talent book, a talent resource guide that different tech companies and other companies can review these former Airbnb employees' resumes, their projects. They can talk with recruiters to really get in there and try to help these people get new positions. So as an example of a CEO who has these core values and he's really showing them in a very creative way by using his internal resources at the company and communicating with the world, trying to help his people out. And he's not doing it to score points or for show. It's a very sincere reaction and a sincere action that he's taking to help people. That's how I perceived it. You may perceive it differently. But I just wanted to show you that as another example of very thoughtful communication, and thoughtful communication followed up by thoughtful acts. that resonate with authenticity. And I think if you're going to communicate as a company, whether you're a small company, mid-size, or large company, or a nonprofit, before you do anything like put tinkling piano music and images of people helping each other that are from a stock library and so forth, before any companies do that, I think they would be well served about thinking about what they're going to do, as it's going to reach a lot of people, and a lot of people who are in a lot of pain and confusion and need some help. And that help can come in the form of smiling, like the Rakuten monkeys, or it can come in the help of legitimate help, like Brian Chesky at Airbnb setting up a resource site for all of the employees, the 25% of employees that got laid off from Airbnb, and allowing other employers to view their resumes and using his internal resources to help. So those are two examples. If anybody has any questions or comments, I'd love to open it up. I was supposed to talk for 20 minutes. I don't think that's nearly 20 minutes. But this was such an interesting topic. I wanted to start hearing from all of you earlier so we could have a discussion.
Well, I, for one, have a question that I would love to ask. When thinking, I mean, we deal with this a lot, particularly as we're doing the consultancy right now. So we're hearing from a huge range of businesses, and most of them are very small. It might just be one or two people that are actually providing communications right now. And so we've been telling them exactly what you're saying, which is your communication needs to be really thoughtful. It needs to be very personal. It needs to reflect the values of what you're doing. And I'm wondering, in regards to sort of thinking about the type of content businesses or nonprofits might want, what sort of questions do you think they should be asking themselves before they're creating content that sort of addresses what's happening?
I think the main question that they should be asking themselves is, what can we do for our community? What can we do for other people? And not just serve ourselves. We're not going to just send out a message that is serving ourselves and telling everybody else about how much we care. I think doing something that shows that you care has a lot more impact. And as you can see from the baseball game and from Airbnb, there's communication, but it was followed by action. So if you just have this standalone anthemic film on Instagram and nothing behind it, it kind of just disappears and it fades away. However, if you do something that really connects and either makes people laugh or in some tangible way helps them out, those are the things that they'll remember once we get through this really difficult time, because they'll see it more as a sharing rather than as a self-serving announcement that blends in with everything else.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Ryan, do we have any questions from the audience that you would like to impart?
Yeah, we got a couple questions coming in, which are great. The first question is from Alexis. What are your thoughts on involving clients or business partners in content creation?
I think it's really important to involve them in content creation, to bring them in and listen to their ideas and include them in the process. I think it is especially important because you want to share with them. You want to share what you're doing. You want to hear what they're doing, and you want to be exchanging ideas and going back and forth instead of creating a wall between yourself and the client. That in the short term and in the long term, I think creates mistrust and gets into a bunch of other areas that can be difficult to get out of. So I would encourage anybody, even with a difficult client, to lay everything out there. Don't withhold information, over communicate, let them know what you're doing, find out as much as possible about what they're doing. And at the end of the day, you're both trying to do the same thing, which is the highest quality, most effective forms of communication. I don't think the clients would say that they would like some simplistic and subpar creative communication. I don't think anybody would say that. So by at least listening to them and incorporating your ideas into their ideas and hearing them out, they'll have a lot more respect for you, even if their ideas don't make the final cut or are not the thing that eventually gets produced. Sometimes they do have ideas that contribute. And I think just keeping all the communication open is what's key, and not placing yourselves or your business above them and saying, oh, we're the experts, so I'm going to show you what we did. And then, if you want to show me stuff that your company did, that's okay. It just doesn't, it's not helpful.
Yeah, that also goes back to being inauthentic. Sorry, Ryan. Do we have more questions?
Yeah, we have a couple more coming. We have like 3 or 4 more questions. Next one is from Jane. Jane works for a higher ed marketing team in Arizona. And her question is, how do we incorporate this into our recruitment messaging?
That's a very interesting question. And I think it's one that Jane, you're seeing, and all of us are seeing at the University of Washington, unfolding in real time. How do we how do we recruit students in this time, and how can we be as authentic as possible and as creative as possible? And I think the main thing to communicate in recruiting is to tell about, if it's your educational institution, all the great things that are there, and eventually all of us will have access to them and to the communities that we connect with, the faculty, the fellow students, et cetera, et cetera. And I would think setting up some kind of real-time, I don't know if it would be a site or an Instagram feed that updated potential recruited students on a regular basis about what the latest status is of what's going on at the school, because the buildings aren't going to go away. The teachers, hopefully, are not going to go away. All those resources are going to be there, and this situation is temporary. So in addition to conveying what the grounded foundational non-changing values of that institution are, being honest with potential students about what you're doing and being more forward-looking about joining this community. So eventually when the smoke clears, that you can join us in person and be a part of this community, and it'll be even better and richer. That's what I would do if I were in that situation. I wouldn't try to not talk about it, because it's very contemporary and it's actually happening. And decisions are being made on an hourly, daily basis by institutions about whether or not they're going to have classes or not have classes. But I think it would be useful to communicate and talk with them, I think, on 2 levels of communication. One, on one side, kind of the overall brand values of the institution, the things that won't change, and on the other side, the real, in current, latest and greatest news about what the university or what the college is doing to navigate this time, and giving them as much information as possible. And the other thing I would add is not staying silent for long stretches of time. What I've seen with some institutions is that the president will make one statement and then nobody hears anything for 3 weeks. So if you're recruiting, I don't think that's the best way to handle things. I think you have to have an ongoing communication, or have folks available to answer questions via Zoom, or answer questions through Facebook, or post things on Twitter. That has to be kind of a living and breathing ongoing experience for them. Because if one person who represents the institution speaks and then there's no speaking for another 15 days or something, I think you lose people.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's been, I mean, even coming from the UW, and I am not taking a class this quarter, partially because I kind of wanted time to figure out what was happening for myself, as well as how things were going to be working as far as online classes are concerned. So I think that, again, it's that authenticity, right? Coming back to sort of being really thoughtful about what you're saying to people, how you're communicating to them, and sort of being aware that the situation is constantly in flux and that we don't have any control over it. And that's a really important aspect of communication right now, is that we all have to be willing to sort of take our time, reflect on what we've said, while also looking ahead to unknowns. Ryan, do we have another question?
Yeah, we got a solid flow coming in, so this is great. Next question is from Rachel, and it's going back to the video at the beginning. Can you talk a bit about how you explain the sameness of all of the commercials? And do we default to cliches during crisis? Are creative directors all trained to think similarly?
Ryan, was that last sentence a question? Are all creative directors trying to think similarly?
Yeah.
And Susan, you can answer this question too. I think that's a really accurate, well, I think that's a very perceptive way of looking at this situation, that there is this default to what's known and what's familiar in trying to put these messages together. And I think the frightening thing is that these films were from all different industries, from companies all around the country and all around the world, and they end up with this sameness. And I think a lot of it is an aversion to risk. Now is really not the time to be experimenting with crazy, inappropriate stuff. But as we've seen from the Airbnb example and from the Taiwanese pro baseball team example, there are ways to make your mark, to help, to reach out, which aren't carbon copies of what other companies are doing. And it reminds me of kind of one of the Apple sayings, is that you're trying to, and especially students in this program, are trying to be leaders and not be followers. So when I look at those films, that whole montage that we looked at, I see a lot of followers. And in a crisis, what you need is leaders. And as communication leaders, it's more important than ever to show that you're thinking and considering and bringing all these aspects of differentiation and help into your effort. Susan, I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, we deal with a lot of very small nonprofits and small businesses. And I think that what's really important to keep in mind for those is that you have something to offer. And it's important to tap your community to talk about what you need to offer your community, what's important to them, what do they want to be hearing about, like what is relevant. And I think that being creative is a lot, I would almost say a lot easier in a smaller business, because you're not as risk averse as someone that has an enormous budget that they're willing to throw at something. You really have to be much more nimble. You have to be quick. You have to be able to, change things, have things be more of a flow. You have to be able to use one video and knock it into lots of different pieces to be able to share across lots of platforms and have that be your one driving factor. So you have to be a lot more creative when you're dealing with smaller companies and smaller organizations. And I think that is one thing that is actually an asset. Because when you get those big budgets, you really have to commit to something, and you have to have, all of this extraneous, stuff to deal with that as a small business that you just can't afford. So you might want to, but ultimately, it's not as important. It starts to be more about the message and less about the production. We got another one, Ryan?
Yes, we do.
Can I jump in real quick with a question or follow-up about sameness? Do you think it has to do with the legal department? Because I work for a huge company, and there was a very strict number of words that we could use to talk about coronavirus, and then it was COVID. And so I felt like that was really constraining on the creative process as usual, but so much more. And so I would be curious if all of those commercials in your video came out at the same time, because like you had to get it right and you had to go out first. So I totally agree with the comment about being second and smaller. Kind of, you can look at what was happened and then be creative off of that. But for those big companies, it was like legal and be first.
What I just to ask a follow-up question, what's the legal aspect that you're referring to?
Just sort of like kind of what words we could use and what channels we could use to talk about it, how often, what was the approval process for every person in leadership to like look at every communication that went out. So that really dampens the creative process, and I thought sort of could lead to some of that sameness, because those are all big companies dealing with those kind of like types of marketing departments.
Since there isn't, from my knowledge, and if anybody has contrary knowledge, please jump in. Since these films were more kind of anthem films about what the company is doing or what they're thinking about, I don't know if they were required by the FTC or by another, like a governmental organization, to keep their communication to a finite set of vocabulary and what they
internal legal.
Oh, internally.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, Alexis, I agree with you. I think it all comes from the CEO, and the CEOs of these companies are thinking, this is not a time to be saying a bunch of weird stuff or trying to be funny. And I happen to, and I've seen this with CEOs over and over again, they'll say, oh, my daughter saw this commercial on TV, and then they'll show the MasterCard commercial. And then he's the head of Publix, and he's like, well, let's do that. And so he brings that to the office and says, I want to do this. And so what happens is it kind of repopulates over and over and over again, because these are inoffensive films. They're well-intentioned, and I think that's what contributes to some of the sameness. Is it's really hard to think of what to say in a time like this, and it takes a lot of work, and you really have to think those things through. And I think you're spot on when you say within internal communication departments, there's a understandable fear of saying the wrong thing. And I think all of these companies wanted to say the right thing, but I think there is an element of not taking a leadership position and saying it's safer to talk about this, or it's safer to do this, or it's safer to, instead of thinking for the public that we're talking to, how can we be authentic as a company and show our brand values and have people feel it.
I think this is a good follow-up question to that from Jessica, to the next question. Her company, she feels her company is being a little oversensitive and worried about risk if we go too far out of the box. What type of gut check can we do to make sure our brand campaign we develop at this time is sensitive, but still unique and serve the community?
I think to really think through what it is that you want to accomplish with the communication, and is there a way that you can do it in your own original way that is not going to be offensive or inappropriate, but just very genuine, without going to these kind of overused themes. And it will take some work to do to figure that out. But if there's an action connected with whatever that form of visual communication is, for example, with the Airbnb, there was an action. They were setting up a resource site for other companies in Silicon Valley to find new employees. And with the baseball team, they found a way to take something that could apparently seem very sad and lonely and depressing, and watching a baseball game with no fans in the stands, and found an alternate way to kind of inject some humor and humanity into it. And I just think having an alternative way to approach things in a time like this, it's not going to be easy, but I think really thinking about it and what you could do to stand out, but also give something back. I think it needs to be a combination of both. Susan, did you have any thoughts on that?
I agree with what you're saying. I don't really, it's kind of a hard one.
It is.
Yeah. Well, let's keep rolling. We'll see if something comes to me. Ryan, do we have any more questions?
Yes, we do. Next question is from Meg. This is, so you share some great examples of large companies and their response to COVID. Do you have any examples from smaller businesses or nonprofits with fewer resources, or tips on how smaller orgs might be able to make their brand stand out at this time?
Good point. For smaller brands, I think the same rules apply, because I think there's a general thirst for authenticity, and the organization doesn't have to be a multi-billion-dollar organization to do something really creative and thoughtful. We have these amazing tools at our disposal for filming things, for doing things on Zoom, for coming up with new concepts. And I think it's the time to start using those things to be really creative and helpful and authentic, and to get a message out. So I think it's not confined to large companies. Any one of us can, as our own individual sole proprietors, say we're all producers or we're all art directors, get a Shutterstock account, find images, put them together, and create something like the big companies created without a lot of trouble. But I think thinking of new and innovative approaches to what the business problems are and how the business is going to exist in this environment, and communicating that, is what would be the most effective thing. And I don't think it's confined to just large companies. For example, if there was a minor league baseball team, which isn't one of a tiny AAA base or single A baseball team in the middle of Texas, and they did something similar, let's say they did something similar to the team in Taiwan, and they were the first to do that, I'm sure they would get a ton of worldwide attention. And if they deployed that, because it's really a very innovative and thoughtful and humorous approach to getting on with things in business.
Yeah, I would second that. I think a lot of what we're seeing right now from the consulting agency is organizations that are struggling to make the shift to different content. And right now, video is so important, even if it's video from your consumers, videos from your clientele, video from organizations that you partner with. How can you share content across different social medias and across your various audiences in order to draw more attention both to yourselves and to this other organization that you're partnering with? So it's thinking about community, particularly when you're a small business or you're a small organization. You need to start thinking really creatively about how you can reach those people. What's the best way? Maybe you just ask them, like, can you send us posts about what are you doing right now? If you're a small business, like, how are you, affected by COVID? What are you doing at home? Like, it doesn't all have to be doom and gloom. Like, in fact, it's better if it's just authentic, if it's personal, if it's, I'm doing this funny thing in my kitchen right now, or, just trying to think about really creative ways of creating engaging content with your knowledge base that makes sense for your organization or your business, that would reach your consumers or your clients in a really thoughtful and engaging way.
And part of the subtitle of this seminar is communication and connection. And to be honest with everybody, once I saw this montage of sameness, it kind of bugged me a little bit, because I was bummed out that there wasn't more thought put into those communications, that they seemed kind of slapped together and had that sameness that you're describing, when in this time we want to hear and be touched and connect with really profound and authentic messages. They can be humorous, they can be, not as funny, but have a different creative direction. And people are, and consumers and everybody who is the buying population around the world are really, really, really perceptive and really, really smart. That film that you saw, somebody put a lot of effort into that and putting that and editing that together. And by just thinking outside the box in a way that you're trying to show your audience and consumers that you really care about them and that you want to connect with them and you really mean it, that's hard to do. But it can be done. We've just seen 2 examples of it. So it requires quite a bit of thinking and not going to the Hallmark card aisle at the pharmacy and getting your mom a happy birthday card that just says happy birthday mom, you are wonderful. It's just, it's appreciated, but it doesn't have that personal touch.
Yeah, it feels flat. That's something that I think I keep running across with content. It's like, oh great, you're putting that out there, but I get nothing from it. Like there's no emotion. It feels soulless. Like I'm not getting that sort of emotional richness that we all really need right now. So yeah, there needs to be more punch. There needs to be something that really makes you stand out and what it is that you're saying and why you're saying it, because it's to your community, which is what makes you unique.
The other thing I found, Susan, and I don't know if the group has observed this too, is that there's a fatigue with this kind of communication, that since all of these things are looking the same and you're seeing them on Instagram and Facebook and on television over and over during different timeouts or in different ad pods, that it starts to build a resentment and an anger. I'm talking about myself. I'm not talking about the general population. That like I'm so sick, and I've heard this from friends and family saying, I am so sick and tired. If they put another ad like that one on TV, I'm going to scream. That's kind of the feedback that I'm getting now about these types of films that populate the internet and broadcast. That it's really a good time to say something other than this same message over and over and over again, just getting slammed with it every single day.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah. And even just the zooming, I mean, there's a real sense of fatigue because we're staring at screens more than we used to. It's like we don't have that sort of social engagement that interrupts our day. So yeah, I think that content needs to reflect that. It's something that, there's a balance. There's a balance between the content that you're creating, whether it's video, whether it's text, whether it's animation, whether it, you need to make sure that you're sort of feeding all parts of the brain when you're thinking about the content that you can create for your audience. And, you can do it on a really small budget. It doesn't have to be some masterful production.
Exactly.
Yeah. Ryan, do we have any more questions?
Yeah, we have the next 2 actually kind of dealing with where we go from here, kind of looking somewhat long term. And just looking at time, we probably have room for maybe 2 or 3 more questions if folks want to pop in the chat. But this question is from Paul. The consumer mindset is changing so rapidly week to week. How should brands be thinking about their medium to long-term marketing plans in order to be relevant 4 to 6 months from now?
That's an excellent question. It's hard to see the future for any of us because this is a moving target. And this is just off the top of my head. Maybe what I would think about is what your messaging would be in a typical environment and how to adjust that messaging over the next 4 to 6 months so that you're having some of the normality of the future, but you're acknowledging the present. And that's a tricky creative wicket to get through, but I think it can be accomplished. Susan, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah. Again, I feel like this is where small businesses and nonprofits can really have a leg up. Again, it's that idea of pivoting really quickly. One of the things that I've been suggesting to our small business and nonprofit clients is that now, like I was saying before, now is the time to stay nimble, right? You don't want to commit to something that's going to be long or, arching. Like, you want to hold small fundraisers. You want to sort of focus on small moments. You want to talk about sort of, building up this resilience and sort of what we're all having to go through right now, while still maybe, if you have upcoming programs or you have upcoming things, you can still obviously look forward to those events or those meetings or those, whatever it is, product launches, whatever it might be. But thinking about it in a way so that you're able to transition really easily if something else comes up, if the restrictions get back in place, which may very well happen. We don't know. So yeah, it's again, being nimble, making sure that you're not overcommitting to something or you're putting yourself in for something where you're going to have to spend a large amount upfront to get something done. You need to start thinking creatively about how you can create information resources for people, for your consumers, for your clients, so that it is something that's still very engaging. It creates a different amount of content. You can break it down, you can share it in different ways. Yeah, being nimble.
I agree. And I think this, as you were talking, Susan, I was thinking about this. Maybe the approach is to have a phased communication approach. For example, we have our 4 phases of opening in the state of Washington, where different things are allowed during each phase, and it gets more and more open. So we're in the stay-at-home mode right now, and then we can go out a little bit, and restaurants can be at 50% capacity, and then it opens a little bit more, and we get to do a little bit more, and then the final last phase is normality. That's phase 4. So maybe just thinking about what life would be like and what kind of communication you'd like to be talking about in each of those phases, because they're obviously very different. We're still in the lockdown phase and people are eager to get out. So what would be something that's not too ambitious and would not, I don't mean not ambitious, but a concept that would acknowledge what's going on but look to the future? What would that look like? How would that be communicated? So this phasing approach, I think, would be something that you could replicate in communication and keep it in try to keep it in synchronization with what is going on in the state or in the region where you're offering goods and services.
Yeah, and I think also just making sure that you're revisiting each of those steps periodically with your team, making sure that you're all sort of paying attention to what's happening so that you are aware of any regulations or restrictions or good things so that you can revise your message and stay sort of on top of that. Do we have one more question, Ryan?
Yeah, we have one more question, and it's related. It is from Roger. For brands that are not making profits during this time, what are the most important utilizations of branding for them long term?
Can you repeat it one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, for brands that are not making profits during this time, what are the most important utilizations of branding for them long term?
In my opinion, the most utilizations of branding is even if a corporation, large or small or nonprofit, is not getting donations or not making a profit, to invest in the future. And by purchasing media, by investing, by doing things like Airbnb, setting up a resource for people to help people, and customers won't forget that you're taking your own resources, in the case of Airbnb, taking your own internal resources and saying, this is a really tough time, we're going to try to give back somehow, and here's the concrete way that we're going to give back. So we're not just saying a lot of stuff. If our expertise is in writing software and establishing really high-end websites or e-commerce sites, for example, maybe offer to do that for free and send out a message about how you're doing that, and you're going to consult with people who have been laid off to set up their own businesses. So I think having an action component that shows that you're putting your money where your mouth is with a marketing budget and helping people out in this time so that they can remember when we get through this time that you did that without any expectation of anything back. Like, oh, you're going to buy my hamburgers 1 year from now. That idea is out the window. You're just setting something up to help people and showing that you are being selfless as a company. You're contributing by purchasing media and running anthemic films. That's not concrete enough. You need to do something.
Yeah, I would second that coming from the small business standpoint as well. I think what we're seeing, particularly with nonprofits, is that their community wants them to be doing something. They want to have a fund drive. They want to, collect food for the food banks. They want some way of feeling like they're contributing while still maintaining this community that they've worked so hard for. So yeah, action, absolutely. Well, thank you, Jay. I'm going to go ahead. We have just a few wrap-up thoughts, and then I'm going to turn it over to the Ask Me Anything portion. And for this portion, everyone just feel free to sort of take turns, step up to the mic, ask the questions that you have. Just a few announcements before we go. I just want to say thank you to all the members of the ComLead COVID Consultancy, Stacy Stewart, Ryan Quigtar, Mo Herbert, and Mick Herndon, and especially Evelyn Kuo for her excellent work putting these events together. Thank you. Thanks to Roger Cottle for facilitating the thought exchange questions. Thanks to ComLead student and awesome multimedia extraordinaire tutor, Mo Herber, for tech support, and Ryan Quigtar for his awesome facilitating of our Q&A this evening. Thank you to Alex Stonehill, who is our ComLead head of creative strategy, and for his leadership and help and always question answering with the COVID consultancy. We will be sending out the video capture of tonight, along with a short takeaway and a brief survey, so keep your eyes peeled for those items in your inbox. And if this kind of conversation appeals to you, consider pursuing a graduate degree with the ComLead department. You can visit our website to learn more about our program, and we'll pop that link in the chat for you all. And if you're on the other end of things and you would like pro bono communication consulting, please contact COVID Consulting. You can go to our website, and we would be happy to speak with you about your communication challenges. Again, that will also be in the chat box. Next week, we have Anita Verna Crofts back as moderator, and you can look forward to a happy hour conversation with ComLead faculty member and Rumble Media co-founder, Carol Schiller. Happy hour, I want to emphasize that. Grab a drink, she'll probably tell you to do that. And of course, Jay will be remaining for a few more moments. If you want to stick around and ask him a few questions directly, please do. We'll go ahead and stop the recording now so you can have at it.